Hello. I'm aware that it's mid-March, but I think it's time for a February wrap-up. The time got away from me feeling quite blue. That's definitely a nice way to put it. So I didn't really have the energy to be in front of the camera and talk about books. I'm feeling more like myself, so I figured I'd wrap up everything that I read in February, which wasn't a whole lot, was incredibly varied, and I had one book that I really loved. Okay, so the first book that I read in February, this isn't my typical book, but you know, here we go. I read Jane Eyre, and I don't read classics that often. I read quite a few of them when I was a teenager. I definitely read this as a teenager and I remember loving it. Reading it again was a good experience. Like I said, it's not really my typical type of book for a few reasons. One of them being I prefer a book that's over a much shorter period. This is almost her entire lifetime. So from when Jane Eyre is about 8 years old up until she is, I don't know, maybe in her, well, it's not actually her whole life. I would think that because it's like, you know, the ending seems all tied up, but she's still quite young. It starts when she's about 8 and then maybe ends in her like early 20s. It is a journey through a lot of adversity, a lot of isolation, a lot of really sad circumstance. Rereading it older, Jane is a bit hysterical at times. Given the things that she's been through when she was younger, which is understandably more upsetting, and then the way that she deals with the kind of feelings over a man, I would say she's a bit hysterical. But the main thing for me rereading it is treatment. Sorry, please stop beeping. The treatment of mental illness and racism that's in the novel. That isn't anything that was touched on when I was reading it at school, and I kind of wish that it was. Now reading it as I'm older and a bit more educated, I feel like Brontë does paint a picture of how women who are mentally unwell and women of colour were treated, and it is heartbreaking to see within the book. I kind of wish that that had been more of a cause of pain for Jane rather than her pining for this man that, you know, he is not a catch. She pines for him for so long, and I mean, you love who you love, but you know, I'm not convinced that Rochester is a good man or, you know, someone that you would want to spend your life with. My favorite part of the book is actually when she's a little bit older. I don't really want to spoil it, even though I know that it came out literally forever ago and most people have probably read this. But my favorite part of the book is when Jane has left Thornfield and she's kind of living her own life now. She isn't tied to her family who did not treat her well. She isn't tied to a master that is Mr. Rochester. She is living a life that maybe is much more simple and it isn't exactly what she wanted, but the people that are the two women that populate her life at that time, I feel like that I enjoyed so much, just women being together and being happy. And I wish that there was more of that within this, but I guess it's not really what it's about. There is so much anxiety and uncertainty. It is a very compelling read. I did find myself wanting to keep going and keep going and keep going. Also, I annotated it a lot. What I appreciate about Bronte's writing is her masterful mix of realism and the Gothic. So to begin with, she's often stating these observable facts of life. She's stating what is there, she's stating what Jane is seeing, she's stating where Jane is, her environment. But then the realism is kind of layered because we also have the psychological realism. There is a lot of how Jane is feeling, how her emotions are conveyed through the way in which she reacts in response to others. So I feel like the realism is very strong, which only makes the Gothic more unnerving. And I just thought the mix of the two was so brilliantly done. There's a reason this is a classic. The writing is fantastic. I absolutely loved the way that the weather mirrors her interior world so much. If you haven't read it, I would recommend it. It is a bit chunkier than my usual reads, but yeah, there's a reason it's a classic. So if you're fancying reading something that is out of your kind of comfort zone, but still has your female protagonist, still has a lot of moodiness, a lot of broodiness, then maybe Jane Eyre's for you. I mean, she's a bit of a hysteric, but would definitely recommend. Okay, next up I read a book that I don't have here, but a book that I could not stop talking about. I underlined so many things. I was worried that it would fall apart. It was To the River, A Journey Beneath the Surface by Olivia Laing. I love Olivia Laing. Laing can write. Laing can really write. I was surprised to find that it was actually a piece of travel writing, which is not a genre that I would gravitate towards naturally. But I am so glad that I read this book. It was teeming with imagery that was spilling off the pages and immersed you in this pilgrimage that Laing was taking along the River Ouse in Sussex. So the book takes us through a week-long journey down the River Ouse. Laing is taking this trip over midsummer, so it is very hot. She records her experience on this journey down the river, and you feel the heat coming off the pages. You feel languid, long days of summer, and that is interspersed with parts of history at different points in the river. We begin with Virginia Woolf's death. She drowned herself in the River Ouse, and Virginia's story weaves through the whole book. And I've got to say that that was definitely my favorite thread to read. There was a lot of other medieval English history, which it's not really my passion. I found myself kind of drifting away a little bit, but you could tell that it was so passionately and well researched that there was still some engagement from me, even though I really don't care about kings in medieval history and their armies killing each other and sticking their heads on spikes. That's not what I'm here to read, but I'm so glad that I did read this book. It was absolutely gorgeous, apart from the heads on spikes. I would say this book is for you if you appreciate nature, if you are looking for some lyrical and bewitching writing, and if you have love for the mystic and brutal power of water. There is quite a lot of mythical stories woven through there as well. I feel like this book has something for everyone. I loved it. I'm still talking about it. I would definitely recommend it to you if you like niche non-fiction, which I'm learning is incredibly fun to find and read. Next up, my favorite book of February, which was Motherhood by Sheila Heti. I can't believe I didn't read Sheila Heti before last month. This book was, it's difficult to find the words. It was incredibly relatable, for one, being a women in her 30s and having those questions come up all the time around motherhood, whether that's in the form of friends settling down and having families, or thinking about having families, or you know, it's the typical narrative that you would see in films and TV and in books, and traditionally that's what's expected of us. And I found that Sheila Heti's point of view on this was so necessary and is a point of view that absolutely needs to be heard and respected. One of the things that annoys me the most is when people will say, oh, but you'll change your mind, to someone who says they don't want children. And I feel like Heti really explores, like, why is this so expected of us? That it's almost forced on us, that it feels like we're lying to ourselves if it's not something that we passionately want. And she explores her reasons for maybe not wanting to have a child and not wanting to be a mother. And her reasons are completely valid, just like anybody else's who says that that's not what they want for their life. A point that I really loved was she said that one of the reasons people have children is because they want to leave behind a legacy. And that's a bit egocentric, that we want something of ourselves left behind in this world. And I think it's very natural to want that. I think almost everybody will want that, but it doesn't have to be in solely that way. We don't have to procreate, have a baby, and have them be the thing that we leave in the world. Like, why can't our art be our legacy? That is a form of creation. It is something that we put our blood, sweat, and tears into. It is something that should be seen as valid as a legacy. And also, I thought it was really, really well written, the way that she viewed her relationship with her mother and how that influenced her choice in whether she wants to have children, and influenced the way that she thought about motherhood and the different types of mothers that there are. So this book is written in fragments, which obviously always feels incredibly quick to read. They're written like journal entries. She's writing these conversation with herself. She's exploring this concept, trying to come to a decision in the end. I think this was written over a few years, and she uses coins in this, and she does stipulate at the beginning. Let's just see this. She writes 2 notes. She writes where she got her inspiration for the coin flipping that she uses in the book, and then she writes a further note saying, in this book, all results from the flipping of coins result from the flipping of actual coins. And I watched an interview with her, and I listened to a couple of podcasts that were interviewing her, and people didn't seem to believe that the answers that she was getting from the coins were all real, that she didn't doctor anything. She was writing exactly what the coins were telling her. So the coins could only tell her yes or no. And I thought that it gave this beautiful insight into how her mind worked to answer more questions. She was using it as a tool to kind of figure out what she really wanted depending on the answer that she got. So if she got a no, she would be reframing her questions, not to necessarily get a yes, but more to figure out, why not? Okay, where else can this go? What does that mean? And I really enjoyed the coins. I know that some people have said that they found it quite tiring, but I loved the kind of internal, inquisitive digging that it produced. The fragments are broken up into, I guess, chapters. And to begin with, they are chapters of places, and then they move into the phases of the menstrual cycle. And I thought that that was so clever given what the book is about. And when you're reading it, you can really see how the different phases of the menstrual cycle influence her thinking, influence her emotions, influencing how she's interacting with others, influencing how she feels about motherhood. I can't say enough about how much I love this book. It was so provocative and honest, and at times I honestly felt like I was reading my own thoughts on the page. It is a wonderful book. Okay. I then read a book that I did not love nearly as much, and I was worried that was maybe influenced by how much I did love Motherhood. After some time away from this book, I realized that I probably like it even less than I thought. No One Is Talking About This by Patricia Lockwood, written in that fragmented style that seems to be everywhere at the moment. So it was very quick to read. It's split into 2 parts. I did a vlog on this book that you can go watch if you want to see more in-depth thoughts about it. But basically, if we're distilling it down to the nitty-gritty, I like the concept, I thought that was interesting, but the book as a whole just wasn't for me. It was not for me. But then this month I read another internet novel and it was 5 stars. I absolutely loved it. So you can catch that in my March wrap up, and at this rate that will probably be out in like August or something. And then the last book I read this month, book number 5, was Mona by Pola, oloixarac, and I really like this. I think this book is for you if you like books about writers, books about academia, books that have dark undertones and a little bit of the absurd. I like all of the above, so when I read the blurb for this, I was sold immediately. Also, I don't have the book here because I loaned it to my sister, and I'm expecting her to really enjoy it as well. It has a stunning cover. So Mona is a successful young Latin American writer who's working at Stanford. So she's based in California, and she's notified that she has been nominated for a prestigious writing award. We then follow her traveling to Sweden to go to this, I think it's maybe like 4-day long event with other writers. They're sharing their work, they're going to talks, there's bonding activities, and then at the end, the winner will be revealed. And whilst we're there, we are subjected to all these writers pretentiously talking about their own work and complimenting each other and fangirling over one another or holding grudges against one another. And it's a really interesting environment for this story to be taking place, because there is a violence that is weaving its way through all of these writers' activities that are going on. And we learn that Mona is struggling to contend with something that has clearly happened, and it kind of pops up in her dreams, and she finds herself going off into a daydream about violence, and it is really quite hard to read about at times. So I would say content warning for sexual abuse and violence towards women. When it's juxtaposed to all these writers and them like pompously talking about their work, or they're doing things like going to the lake or playing football, it's a very real depiction of what it's like to deal with trauma, and you have to still live your life and you have to still be around other people. I would say the writing is hallucinogenic, hypnotic, raw, and it really ignited a reflection on trauma and how it is such an individual experience on how you deal with it. Yeah, I really like this book. And when you get to the end, oh my god, the ending, what a ride, what a ride. And that's everything I read in February. Again, it was quite a small reading month, but I mean, that was fine. I was feeling the depression heavy, and so my recommendation that is not a book for you this month is something that I turn to for comfort and for enjoyment and feel good vibes, because I absolutely love it. I rewatched the series of High Fidelity for maybe the 4th time, I think. Like, it's that good. It stars Zoe Kravitz as Rob, who owns a record store, and she is reflecting on her top 5 heartbreaks. It is based on the book and the film. The previous iterations, I would say, like, weren't really my cup of tea, even though I kind of loved the idea of it. But this version, so good, so good. The styling, seeing New York City, just, oh my god, everything about it, especially Zoe Kravitz, is perfect. So I'd recommend that to you. Another thing that I would recommend, and something that I really enjoyed last month, was looking at transcendental art. Let me just get some notes up and I will tell you which ones I really loved. Let me just check something. An artist within this movement whose work is like fairly well known is Hilma af Klint, a Swedish painter and mystic, and her work is, oh, I could just look at it all day. Like, there is so much to look at. There is a really good podcast about her actually, and her work and her spirituality that I'll link down below. I think it's by Art History Babes, but let me just check that. Yes, Art History Babes did an episode on 17th of September 2017 on Hilma af Klint, and it's a really interesting listen. So I would, you know, if you have a spare hour, I would pop that on maybe whilst you're doing some dishes or cleaning the kitchen or something. That's when I like to listen to my podcast, when I'm doing my housework, or also when I'm going on walks. I really like to listen to art history podcasts. Another transcendental painter whose work I really love is Agnes Pelton. So yeah, I would, you know, if you're into art and art history, then I would suggest looking up those two painters. Their work is very interesting. They are very interesting. Also, just looking at their work is like a really cool experience, because I don't know, like it's like humming with something. There is like something there. So that's all the books I read this month and a couple of recommendations for you. I want to know what your favorite read of February was and what you're most looking forward to reading this month in March. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.